Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is ColdBlueLight. Thanks for joining me today. So today we're going to be going over very simple elements that can be used together to start to build up a game. You can use these elements in pretty much any kind of game. It's not just exclusive to an RPG or a visual novel. In this case, it kind of looks like a visual novel because of the backgrounds that I've chosen. But it's just to give you sort of hopefully an idea of how these elements fit together to assemble the game that you want to assemble. So these elements we'll be talking about today are a simple sprite background. We're not going to use Godot's parallax background because this is just a static image and a sprite will work just fine for that. The other thing we'll be talking about is the panel. The panel is what we're going to be using for our UI. In this case, it's used for the background to our text box. Our text box is just a simple text label with a script attached to it that will print the text out one line at a time, like in most RPGs. And then a button that will let us skip scenes because the layout I've chosen is similar to a visual novel. Alright, so let's go ahead and quit to the project list and get our folders set up, and we'll go from there. We'll start over just like we did with the last video. So let's do that real quick. I'm going to go project and quit to project list. There we go. So let's go ahead and make a new project, and we're going to call this novel like, and let's give it a folder. I want it on my desktop because that's where we were working out of last time. You guys can put it anywhere, and let me find that folder, Godot Basics. Let's make a folder in here, call it VN like. There we go. Hit OK, and then select it. And we'll use OpenGLES. Just leave everything default below here and create and edit. And now Godot will launch for us. So as usual, it starts us off in the 3D perspective. We're going to be working in 2D today, so let's switch to 2D. And we can get started real quick by selecting node 2D as our scene's root. The next thing we want is a sprite. Just typed in sprite. I clicked the add button here, typed in sprite, found sprite, hit create. Okay, there's nothing in it now because we have nothing in our game. It's completely empty other than some default things that Godot is generated for us, such as the icon and the environment for the 3D viewport. But we're not going to mess with that right now. So let's get our folders set up too. Every time you make a new project, I want you to get into the habit of creating folders for your scenes, folders for your fonts, your art, everything, your scripts. This will help you keep stuff organized so that when you're going through your project later, you're not having to scroll through a giant list of stuff. You can find your things just by clicking on the folder, and this will make your game development process a little bit less painful. So let's go ahead and get those folders set up. New folder. What we're going to call this one, art. There we go. That's art. And then another one for scripts. Okay, and I think we want fonts because we're going to be using text. So new folder, fonts. Okay. And then we want one more folder for our scene. Okay, so that's all set up. Let's get some resources in here. I've already got me a couple. You guys can grab them from the links down below, or you can make them yourself, which I encourage you to do. So let's go ahead and grab these. I've got my folder here. I'm going to go ahead and copy some of these out of it. And I've already got me a nice little art folder. I'm just going to grab these PNGs right here and give them a copy. and paste them over into our art folder here. Okay, and Godot will automatically import these for us, and now you can see them inside of Godot. Let's minimize this, and we got to get one more resource. Let's grab our font. I should already have had a font. Okay, I was in the wrong folder. Yeah, make sure you're in the right folder. Let's see. We want to use. I'm going to use Romulus. Copy that one, and we'll put it into here. I'm going to do one last thing to help save some time, so I don't have to retype this. I've been typing this most of the day. I'm going to go ahead and copy my two scripts that I've written for the button and the chat box, and I'll explain these to you once we get to that. But let's go ahead and continue with our setup, and then scripts, and paste them into here. Okay, now if we go back over to Godot, we should see our stuff has been imported successfully. There's our art, there's our font, and there's our scripts. We're not going to copy the scenes, we're going to make those on our own. So let's make sure our font's set up real quick. That looks good. Let's create a new resource on the font. Right click, new resource, type in font. We want to create a dynamic font. Hit create, and we'll give this a name, Romulus. In my case, you guys, if you used a different font, that's fine. Just give it any name you feel. Hit save. And over here on the settings, we're going to change the font data over in the inspector. I just clicked on it right here. Font data, load, fonts, Romulus. Okay, and now our font's set up to be used with our text. So let's go ahead and make this scene look pretty. I said before that we're not going to be using a parallax background. We're just going to be using a static image, and a sprite's really good at static images. Sprites can also be animated if I'm not mistaken, but we're going to be using just a plain static image today. So I've got my sprite. Let's give it a name, because remember, organization is key. Background, there we go. And texture, let's give it a texture. Texture will be what image we'll be using. Since this is our first scene, art, I decided I want to start off here at the front of the school. And you notice that it's not quite centered. That's no big deal. Just drag it over to line it up with your viewport. Your viewport being this little light blue rectangle. So I'm going to drag that down and then pull this over. Alright. That's looking good. Let's get a little bit more on the bottom here. Okay. And maybe just over just a little bit right there. Nice. Let's also lock this by pressing the lock selected object button. This way, when we click in our scene to move stuff, we're not sliding our background around everywhere. Alright, so the next thing we're going to want is a panel. Okay, we're going to create a panel, and I'm going to stretch it out to be about here, maybe something like that. I want to move it, actually I want it a little bit wider. Let's move it maybe about here. Just arrange it however you guys feel. I'm liking that. It looks pretty nice. Let's take a look closer. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, so now we need to set the theme for the panel. All I did was click over here in the inspector and select theme, new theme, and then I clicked here again. This will let you set the font and stuff for it. I'm gonna, let's see, that's actually, I think I went to the wrong one here. Though you can skin the entire panel, from my understanding. That'll be something that we mess with in another video. Styles, that's what I wanted. I was looking for styles. Don't worry about the theme for now. We'll work on that later. So let's go to styles and see this button right here where it says custom styles. This little checkbox, check that. And now we're going to say load, and I'm loading from our art folder. I want to use a PNG. I might have to make one real quick. Yeah, I think I want new style box texture. And then I click here. And now I'll select the texture again. Art. And then I've got a border that I made in Krita. And hit open. Okay, that looks nice. Now we can see the change has been made to our panel here in our scene. But it doesn't quite look right. You can't see through it. You know, most visual novels and most RPGs, you can kind of see the art behind the panel. So let's do that real quick. That's super simple. There's a button down here called Modulate. You just click this, and you'll see at the bottom that there is an alpha slider. I'm going to slide that down. And you notice that our text box gains some transparency, and we can now see the background behind it. I'm going to leave it about maybe 183. Okay. And now let's add ourselves a label. Yeah, I'm just going to leave that as panel for now. I was going to say maybe we should name it, but we'll leave it alone. We know it's a panel. So let's go back to adding that label. Back in our add node button, type in label. B, there it is. Create. And we'll give this one a name, chat box, because that's where our text is going to be displayed. And we'll extend it out to here and just down a bit, and let's get it maybe centered about right there. And let's add another node to panel. Let's give it a button right here at the top. Create, and we'll name this button skip. Okay, that's all we need to do there. Aside from lining the button up, let's stretch this out a bit and pull it down some until we get it to the size that we like. And I'm going to place it about right here, because here's our chat box. There's the skip button. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Close to how I have it set up in my first project anyway. Okay, so we haven't saved in a minute. You definitely are going to want to save pretty often. Not all the time, but save often, just in case something goes wrong. So let's save our scene, Control S, and save it under our scenes folder. We're going to call this one school.tscene, save. Okay. And let's get to adding those scripts I was talking about earlier. One last thing. Let's set some text for our button. Our button has 0 text right now. Same for our chat box label. Let's add some text. If you click back on your button, you see an option on the side here for text. We're going to write in skip. Okay, but it's not in our font, so we have to set the font on this. So if you scroll down and select custom font, you can say load fonts Romulus, and there it is. And it's really small because we have a little bit more setup to do with the font itself. So if you come back over here in our fonts folder, click our font, we can edit these settings for the font right here at the top. I want to set it to about 25. That looks okay, and I want to use filter on this one because it makes the text for this particular font look better. You guys can play with the settings if you use a different font. And our chat box is empty. We have no story to display, so let's think up of a story. So maybe one day, late summer, after summer vacation, Godot-chan is heading back to school. So she's excited to see her friends again and can't wait to see them. So let's write our story here in the box. I can't wait to see my friends again. Okay, and we'll set this font to be the font that we just set for our button. Of course, you can have multiple fonts. And let's see here. Might need to adjust the font size again. Let's try 30. There we go. And maybe we'll adjust the transparency on our panel. Turn it up just a little bit. Okay. I think that's looking pretty good. So now let's get into the script I was talking about. Also, let's lock this down so we don't move it. Lock and lock. And let's add the scripts. For you guys, you're going to want to come right here and click create and then GD script. It's going to inherit from label. Make sure you save it in your scripts folder. Go up a path, scripts, and name it whatever you guys want. I've already created one, so I'm just going to drag and drop mine. Chatbox.gd onto our script here. And let's take a look real quick. So inside we have a lot of comments. That's what this gray text right here is. We have an extends. It's because it extends, this script extends the label class in Godot. We have two variables. One's called draw text speed, and it's an integer, which means it holds a number. It's set to 0. And then we have our other variable of chatter limit, which I've just set to an arbitrary 56 because later on, if you can see right here, we might extend it later. And so I thought about going ahead and fixing maybe a number of character limit to the text box. But today we're just going to work on printing out the text. So let's focus on that. So we have our two variables. Nothing's going on in our ready function. If you look down here, I've written a custom function, and you can do that by typing in func and then underscore, give it a name. It doesn't have to be underscore. I believe you can say anything right here. Let's say function shades and then semicolon and then pass. Yep. But to keep in naming convention with Godot, I'm choosing to put an underscore in front of all my functions. So we have function underscore show chatter. It doesn't take any arguments. That's this right here is what that's for. It's for passing arguments like string or int or array, but we'll talk about that stuff later. So no arguments are being passed, but what we have inside is a simple if statement. Let's take a look. So if our draw speed, our draw text speed, is less than our chatter limit, which is set to 56, we're going to add 1 to our draw speed until it reaches 56, or until it's until it reaches 56. The next thing we're going to do after this, because it's executing our code here, okay? It starts here and then it says, all right, I'm going to add 1 to it until it's at our chatter limit. And then once it's at our chatter limit, it's going to stop. So the next thing we're going to do is self. This gets a class inside of our node, okay? Self.visible underscore characters. And if you look right here in our chat box over on our node here, you can see something called visible characters. And it's a property of our chat box node. Okay, right now it's set to 1, which means it will show everything. I'm going to change it to 0, okay? And you'll notice that it's immediately cleared our text, but our text up here is still there. So let's go back to our script. So self.visible characters is set to our drawing text speed. Okay? And Then we call this function down here in function process delta. Delta runs every frame of the game in Godot. It's the main game loop if you want to look at it that way. So what we're doing is we're going to add 1 to the visible character count until it hits our chatter limit. Let's take a look at what this looks like, okay? I'm going to press F5, and we're going to need to set this scene as our main node. Select, and then school, open, okay? And then there's our text printed out one line at a time. So our button is next, and it's not doing anything right now, okay? Let's get our button set up, and we're going to need to do a new scene. Now, if we were making a full game, we could consider this the prototyping phase. We're kind of thinking about how stuff fits together and how it all works. If we're making a full game, we would find some way to make this component, the text box, the buttons, etc., one time, and then we'd reuse it across all of our scenes. But just for simplicity's sake today, we're going to make a new scene and duplicate most of the stuff that we've done here. But first, let's add that script to our button that I was talking about earlier. It's called sceneskip.gd. That's what I've named it. Now I'm just going to drag it up here and show you guys real quick what's inside of scene skip. If it wants to open it, there we go. Okay, scene skip. So again, remember I was talking about different things have access to different functions. Like our chat box has access to the property of visible characters. Well, it can also have access to functions that are built in. For our button, the button has a function built into it called pressed, and this will get called every time this button is pressed, okay? And all we're doing inside of function press, this is super simple. We're getting the tree, and this is our scene tree, okay? So it's getting what are we in, and it's changing. It's going to change it. So we're in one scene now, and after this is called, it'll change scenes. And this is following our scene path, because remember, we set up these folders, okay, to keep everything nice and separated. We have our resource folder being at the top, so the first thing we're going to need to type in here is res semicolon / because you can see it right here in our file explorer, and then scenes / and the scene we want to change to, which we haven't made this scene yet. So let's go ahead and do that, because if we run this now and press the button, we're likely to get an error or nothing's going to happen at all. So I'm going to save that and scene, new scene, okay, and then click back to 2D, and you can see that it's empty. So let's go ahead and fill this up with a node 2D, and we're going to repeat the process again. So a sprite will be our background, and again we give it a name, okay, and now we need a panel. Alright, and then the panel has a label, and it also has a button. Okay, let's set up our background real quick. We're going to use a different texture because it's a different scene. Load, art, and I'm going to use this one. Okay. And just like we did the first time, we're going to make sure everything lines up nice and even with our viewport. And I'm just going to scroll that down and scroll it over. Let's take a look here, make sure it's lined up. That looks good to me. And then line up the bottom. And I'm going to check out the side here. Maybe it needs to be over just a little bit. Nice. Okay, so we got our background established just like before. We're going to lock it so we don't move it. See, now we can't move our background around. We're going to grab our panel and just move it down here. and then we're going to resize it to be close to what we have in our first scene. You can always check back and forth between scenes so that you have some continuity when you're setting things up like this. And let's see, I think it's over about here is where I want it, and maybe it's, seems like it's a little bit higher, so let's go up a little bit. That looks pretty good. And because we're not recycling the same stuff from our first scene, we have to set everything back up again. So remember, for setting our background for the panel, it's custom styles, and then tick this little check mark, and then we can, I think we've already made one. Let's take a look real quick. Nope, I didn't make one, so let's go ahead and new texture, and then we'll click here, and then we'll load it. Art, our background, and then we also have to set this back up again. So let's click here, where'd it go? Modulate, there it is. Click back to modulate, and we'll just turn it down to be the same rate that we have in our first scene, which I think was 183. Alright, and yeah, I think right here looks okay. Maybe squish it down just a bit and extend the bottom. Now we need to fix our label to span the length of our panel here. I'm just going to arrange it about there. Leave a little bit of a gap. Let's take a look at the first scene here. We can see the chat box. Yep, goes across, and there's a little bit of a gap. And now let's also rename this one too, just to keep in order with our last scene. Like I said, when you're working on a full-blown game, you're going to want to carry some of this stuff over so you don't have to remake everything. But that's a topic for another video. Let's go ahead and lock our chat box. Also, let's set the font. Don't forget to set the font. Let's see, custom font, and load, and font, and there we go. Now our font is set for this chat box. Let's give it some text. Hi, Godot-chan. Looks alright to me. Let's fix our skip button to resemble the one on our first scene. Almost said first panel. Well, it kind of is, like drawing comic book panels. You have stuff that's continuous between pages. And let's set this one's font. Load, fonts. Okay. And the text will be skip. Okay. And now it matches our first scene. The only thing we have left to do is to set the visible characters to 0. And let's add a little bit more text. Hi, Godot-chan. I've missed you. How was your summer? And you can imagine the extra stuff from here. You can already kind of see the character portrait or whatever in your mind. And you guys can add anything you want from here. Okay, so let's add our chat box script to our chat box. Also, I'm going to lock it so we don't move it. I'm going to lock the skip button as well. And let's save this scene. Control S. Make sure you save it in the scenes folder. I'm going to give it a name of schoolyard. .scene, save. Okay, now we need to check and make sure that the scene is going to match up here in our button on our first scene. And I'm not putting this script onto the button here. We're going to have to, again, it was how I was saying earlier, usually you'll build a whole system around this so you don't have to repeat yourself, but if I was to drag our button script onto this button for the schoolyard scene and change it to be like library or whatever, it would no longer function in our first scene to take us to this scene. So you'll have to think of a way to carry your stuff from one scene to the next. But we'll talk about that later. Just for now, we're playing around, we're having fun, we're getting some basic stuff done. So let's go back and give our game a test run, okay? So F5, and if all goes well, I can't wait to see my friends again. Okay, skip. Hi Godot-chan, I missed you. How was your summer? It can't be a good visual novel without some spelling mistakes, right? So let's correct that. How was your summer, guys? How was? That's half the fun of game development. And run it again. There's our text. And then, hi Godot-chan, I've missed you. How was your summer? And we're done. That is some really basic stuff to get you guys started on putting together an RPG or a visual novel or anything you like. The purpose of this was to just get you guys thinking about how the pieces might fit together. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for today. I appreciate you stopping by. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and come back and see me next time.